Moment now, but just moments ago, we learned something that Senator Dianne Feinstein, the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, says that she backs calls to subpoena Donald Trump Jr. to come before the committee. My panel back with me now. Okay, Michael Zeldin, with your legal expertise, when Dianne Feinstein is saying that she's now backing calls, and she's clearly taking a sort of a tougher stance than her Republican counterpart. Right. What does this mean?
It means that's what her hopes are, but she has no subpoena power. That's within the majority's control, and all she's saying is stop slow walking this investigation. Let's get to the bottom of it. The country, the president, everybody deserves to know what happened here, and if there's any reticence on the part of any witnesses to come forward, let's just subpoena them and get their testimony on the record, as long as it's not a conflict with Mueller, and they can work that out so that there's no Oliver North immunization of a witness that prevents him from being prosecuted, then everything is copacetic.
Laura, what do you think? And what are Democrats hoping to learn from Don Jr.? What are some of the outstanding questions? And where is this whole thing with him cooperating?
Well, I think you have this turf war that has been going on for quite some time between the criminal probe led by Mueller and, of course, the congressional legislative-based probe that's happening. And there is a conflict going on because, of course, nobody wants to willingly testify in front of Congress if it means it will jeopardize or expose him to greater legal jeopardy in front of someone like Mueller. And with the acceleration that we're seeing, with at least 2 now convictions, 2 guilty pleas of people in the Mueller probe, you see that Feinstein is looking for a commensurate acceleration, perhaps progress on their side. The American people have outstanding questions, and they have to do with what is the umbrella term of collusion and what actually is happening here, and is there progress on either side? They see it at Mueller's side, they don't see it in Congress, and of course it should not be surprising to anyone at the day that Conyers has decided to resign and step down from his very prominent position as he was in the Judiciary Committee, and you've got Feinstein asking for, now that distraction's out of the way, let's get acceleration now.
Gloria.
You know, they've interviewed a bunch of people, particularly about what happened on Air Force One, when Don Jr. was kind of the subject of that, and it was a question of that meeting at Trump Tower with Russians and the emails that went back and forth.
When you say what happened on Air Force One, you mean the crafting of
the crafting of the statement about what that meeting was about. We know
the president was involved.
We know the president weighed in, is what Sarah Sanders has said. We're not quite sure what that means, and we're not quite sure how relevant that is to anything. It's not a crime to lie to the American public. We know that statement had to be revised multiple times. But presumably they have interviewed other people about what occurred on Air Force One, and they probably want to fill in the holes here. And Don Jr. was not on the plane, by the way, but his attorney was in contact with people.
But it's not just that's in the sky. It's also, sorry, Michael, it's not just that. It's also the WikiLeaks discussion that was had as well. And so you've got the Russian adoption lawyer who presumably had this conversation, but you've got entering in things like campaign finance laws and about whether you received a benefit in some reform from opposition research. And of course, the back and forth direct messaging between Donald Trump Jr. and Julian Assange are very, very interesting if you're looking at it from the context of, was there somebody who was influencing?
Let's put this on hold while we listen to Sarah Sanders,
the
White House briefing.
Wrapped up a meeting in the Oval Office with 4 families from different parts of the country. They're veterans, small business owners, workers, moms, dads, and students. And they all had one thing in common. The president's plan to cut taxes and reform our broken tax code will help them thrive and build a better life and a better future for themselves and their children. This event was an important reminder that while Washington focuses on the politics of the day, the president is focused on the forgotten men and women around our nation. These are the families who deserve a tax cut for Christmas, and that's exactly what we're going to deliver. Looking ahead, the president will visit Mississippi on Saturday, where they are celebrating the state's bicentennial 200 years of statehood. To mark the occasion, the president will participate in the grand openings of the Museum of Mississippi History and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. Tomorrow, First Lady Melania Trump and Second Lady Karen Pence will travel.
True, then Moore should step aside. I'm wondering how the president reached the conclusion that all of Moore's accusers, including those who have put forward evidence, are lying.
Didn't say they were lying. The president's position hasn't changed, still finds those concerning. But as we've also said, the president feels that he would rather have a person that supports his agenda versus somebody who opposes his agenda every step of the way. And until the rest of that process plays out, you have a choice between two individuals, and the president's chosen to support Moore.
Even if that person who would support his agenda has done what Roy Moore's accusers have said.
Again, we've said that the allegations are concerning, and if true, he should step aside, but we don't have a way to validate that, and that's something for the people of Alabama to decide, which we've also said, and we maintain that, and ultimately it will come down to the people of Alabama to make that decision. David?
Yeah, Sarah, can you tell me a little bit about the process and timing of how the president got to the potential Jerusalem announcement tomorrow? Can you have somewhat of a backstory on that to the degree that you can at this point?
I can tell you that it was a very thoughtful interagency process. In terms of specifics, that's something that will be addressed in greater detail later this evening at the background briefing, and then further by the president in his remarks tomorrow.
Just a quick follow-up, and evangelicals' role in this, how crucial has that been in terms of the Faith Advisory Council?
Look, the president wanted to make the decision that was the best decision for the United States. And I'm not going to get ahead of anything beyond the events later today and tomorrow. John?
Thanks a lot, sir. I have a question for you about the special counsel's office. Does the president believe that special counsel Robert Mueller or anybody on his staff is biased in any way?
We hope that those are fully looked at and investigated. Blake?
Just a follow-up for you, if I may, Sarah. I think it was about 5 or 6 weeks ago that you indicated from that podium on a few occasions that you believe, the White House believes, that Mr. Mueller's investigation will be wrapping up shortly. Since that time, we've seen that a very high-level aide to the president, former aide to the president, the former national security advisor, has entered a plea deal with the special counsel's office. Do you still believe that this investigation is wrapping up soon?
We do, and I'd refer you to the comments that were made by Ty Cobb, where he indicated as such over the last few days. Blake?
Sarah, thank you. Let me ask you two questions on so-called red lines. If Robert Mueller ends up looking into the president's finances, or if he has already looked into the president's finances, does this White House believe that is a red line, and if so, why?
Look, I think it's important to note, and hopefully you guys have seen this statement that Jay Sekulow, a member of the president's legal team, has put out within the last hour, that they confirmed that the news reports that the special counsel had subpoenaed financial records relating to the president are completely false. No subpoena has been issued or received. We've confirmed this with the bank and other sources. I think that this is another example of the media going too far too fast, and we don't see it going in that direction.
Let me ask you the second red line. This White House has consistently said there are two red lines on tax reform, middle class relief, and then a 20% corporate rate. But the president over the weekend seemed to suggest that he would be amenable for a corporate rate up to 22%. Why would he be willing to step over his own red line on that issue?
Look, the president said I guess maybe a couple of hours ago that we're firm and we feel strongly about the 20%, and we're very excited about the progress we've made on that front, and think that we'll get there on both sides in the House and the Senate. Mike?
Sarah. So two quick things. One, does the president believe, as the lawyer from the Solicitor General's office said at the court today, that a baker could put a sign in his window saying, "We don't bake cakes for gay weddings," and that would be legal?
I'm sorry, could you say the first part of that question again? My cough kind of drowned you out.
So the Solicitor General, the lawyer from the Solicitor General's office for the administration, said today in court, at the Supreme Court, that it would be legal, it would be possible for a baker to put a sign in his window saying, quote, "We don't bake cakes for gay weddings." Does the president agree that that would be okay?
The president certainly supports religious liberty, and that's something that he talked about during the campaign, has since upheld since taking office.
And that would
I believe that would include that.
And one other question just on Russia, but not one that you would expect. What does the president think of the decision to ban Russian athletes from the Olympics in 2018?
I haven't had the ability to speak with him directly about that decision since it was made here earlier today, but I'll certainly be happy to talk to him and follow up with you on that. Catherine.
Sarah, House Republican leaders had to push back a vote in a short-term budget bill this week to avert a shutdown. Does the White House think that a shutdown is a possibility?
It's always a possibility, but it's certainly not what we hope for. And we have both Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer coming later this week, and the president hopes to be able to have conversations with them to make sure that doesn't happen. Hallie?
Then the president doesn't think that it would be politically advantageous?
Look, I said that that's not what we would like to see happen, and we're going to have meetings and try to make sure that it doesn't. Hallie?
Two quick ones for you. Just a statement of fact. When did the president know that Mike Flynn lied to the FBI?
As I said earlier, I referred you back to John Dowd's clarification, and
I'm asking for a date. When did he find out? Was it when the announcement was made Friday? Was it prior to that?
Again, I'm not aware of the specifics, but I would refer you to John Dowd for that specific question. I would actually refer you to John Dowd on that specific question, since it's a legal matter I'm not allowed to weigh into.
No problem. The point to you have weighed in on other special counsel matters before, and it's just a statement of fact of when, during the administration, what day the president discovered this lie issue.
And I'm telling you as a statement of fact that you should contact John Dowd. Doesn't seem that hard, Stephen.
Questions on Roy Moore. Sarah, you said just a minute ago that the president would want somebody in the Senate who supports his agenda versus one who does not. Excuse me, and I just want to clarify here then, is it the White House's position then, sort of formally here, that it is worse to have a Democrat in that Senate seat than somebody who is accused of sexually abusing a teen girl?
Look, as I said, we find the allegations to be troubling.
And why did the president endorse?
Look, I think that those are different things in terms of we aren't going to be the ones to determine that process. That's for the people of Alabama to determine what those things come down on. He does want people that support his agenda. He's not going to obviously support a Democrat. And I think if that's our standard, then we need to look at a number of members of Congress that have had allegations brought against them that are still in office. Stephen.
Thanks, Sarah. I do want to nail something down with respect to John Dowd and what he's been telling us in the last couple of days. He's argued that the president cannot be charged with obstruction of justice because he is the chief law enforcement officer in the country. That's his opinion. Does the White House share that opinion? Has the White House counsel's office looked into this question? Does it share that perspective?
Look, I'm not going to get into a back and forth on legal theories, but I can tell you, as the president has said, there's no collusion, there's no obstruction, and that we're confident that the facts will show that when this is wrapped up. Jim?
The whole notion of obstruction of justice, though, it's been discussed in the last couple of days. A lot of people have been talking about it. What do you think about it?
I'm not an attorney, and as far as I know, only John Decker in the room is. And so, if you want to ask him legal questions, you certainly can. I don't know if he'll answer them, but that's as far as I'm going to go on that. Jim?
I'm not an attorney either. Let me ask you about...
I know, that's why I didn't call you out.
Thank you, I appreciate that. This decision on Jerusalem, is the president concerned that there could be violence as a result of recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel? Has that been looked at by this White House?
A number of things have been looked at that have been weighed into the president's decision, but as I said a few minutes ago, I'm not going to get ahead of his remarks, and we'll be certainly happy to address those at a later time.
On Roy Moore, just very quickly, the folks got a couple of questions. Isn't there a moral decision that you're making here? And I'm sure you've heard this talked about in the news the last couple of days that the president has decided to endorse Roy Moore. This is somebody who has been accused of child abuse, of molesting children. How can that vote in the Senate be that important that you would take a gamble on somebody who has been accused of molesting kids?
I think that's something, as I've
said,
underage. As I've said, that's something for the people of Alabama to decide, and that's up for them.
That anyway, has he wrestled with that question?
As I said, we find the allegations very troubling, and again, this is up to the people of Alabama to make that decision. I'm not a voter in Alabama and can't make that decision. Brian.
Sarah, thank you. The president said that the tax plan will hurt him individually. Will the president release his taxes to prove that?
I'm not aware of any plan to do that, but if it changes, I'll certainly let you know.
I mean, he can release it even if it's under audit. He can release his tax returns.
As he said, as long as it's under audit, he's not going to do that, and I'm not aware of any plans to change that policy at this time. John?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. A matter of procedure on the Roy Moore endorsement. Did the president have any conversations with Chairman McDaniel of the RNC after he made his position known, or did he talk to State Chairman Latham in Alabama or any of the players involved in the Republican National Committee before they decided to get back in the race and support Roy Moore?
I know there have been conversations between administration officials and the RNC and supported that move, but legally I can't, because of the Hatch Act, go much further beyond that.
You can't say who the officials are.
I know that there were multiple conversations. I'm not aware if the president spoke specifically with the chairwoman. I'd have to check on that and let you know. But I do know the administration supported the RNC's decision. However, I can't go any further than that at this time. Hunter?
Thank you, Sarah. Given the president's endorsement, does he agree with Roy Moore that Muslims should not be allowed to serve in Congress?
I haven't asked him about a past statement from Roy Moore.
But, I mean, you're saying that their agendas are kind of in lockstep.
I'm saying he supports the president's agenda. The president doesn't necessarily support everything of Moore's agenda. Amen.
Thanks, Sarah. Does the president expect Deutsche Bank or any financial institutions to cooperate with requests for documents from U.S. law enforcement if they get them?
As I said a few minutes ago, Jay Sekulow, a member of the president's legal team, put out that
Message to the financial institutions themselves: if they get a request, should they comply with that?
Look, I'm not going to get into hypothetical situations and try to determine and project everything that could happen. We know that it hasn't happened up until this point, and that the reports out were totally false. And again, the media got ahead of their skis a little bit on pushing and driving that story that wasn't true. Brian?
Just to follow up on one more a bit. Are you saying that you're saying let the people decide, but this administration has endorsed Roy Moore? Why endorse him if you want the people to decide? You're influencing the decision by endorsing him. And secondly, are you saying that no matter who runs as a member of the GOP, it's okay as long as you are in lockstep with the president and vote the way he wants?
Once again, I'm not going to get into every person that could or couldn't run for office down the line. Hold on, I'm going to finish answering the question if you'll allow me to. I'm not going to address, you asked, the end of your question was every person that runs for office. One, I'm not going to weigh into, because I don't know who may run for office. But what I can say, the president made that decision, and he decided that it was better to have somebody that supports his agenda than a Democrat that doesn't. Again, it's still up to the people of Alabama to decide. They're ultimately the only ones that can vote in that election. We'll see what happens. Last question, Dave.
Thanks, Sarah. The administration reported today that illegal border crossings have dropped to a 45-year low. Does that lessen the urgency as we're getting down to spending decisions here about whether to go forward with building the wall in this budget?
I think it shows probably the effectiveness of the Trump presidency and another success story as we wrap up the year, and certainly something that could be looked at. But I think the need for the border wall and border security, as well as responsible immigration reform, still stands, and we still need to look at all the ways that we can protect our national security, and we still feel strongly that that's one of them. Thanks so much, guys.
All right, we're back now with our panel to discuss a pretty eventful White House briefing there. Michael Zeldin, to you first. This was pretty fascinating when Sarah Sanders was asked, did the president know that Michael Flynn had lied to the FBI when he fired Michael Flynn in February? Her answer was that he lied to the vice president. Michael Flynn lied to the vice president. That was the reasoning for the firing. Later, she said that the White House was not aware of when the president knew that Flynn lied to the FBI. I mean, you'd have to try to not be aware, just to be clear on that. But CNN has reported that the White House chief counsel, Don McGahn, told the president in January that Flynn had misled the FBI. So we know that the president knew in January,
right.
But Sarah Sanders is staying away from that with a 10-foot.
That's right. And how is it strikes me, fair question to ask, how is it that the vice president didn't know it also? Because he's gone on and said, I didn't know it, I didn't know it, I didn't know it. And unless this is Wag the dog, and he's a vice president who's just going to funerals in far away places, how does he not know what's going on here too? And so was he being truthful, and was this lie to the vice president a pretext? I think those are questions that Mueller's going to have to answer for us.
Don't forget, this story only came out after the Washington Post published it.
That's when Flynn was fired.
When Flynn was fired, after it became public. And there was a matter of weeks.
That's right.
Between when McGahn met with Sally Yates, who was then the acting attorney general, and when Flynn was fired. So the questions that Mueller is obviously asking is, who knew what when,
That's
including the President of the United States. And so you now have the president's spokesperson coming out there and saying that the president knew that he lied to the vice president. That was the reason for his firing, but she didn't directly answer the question.
That's right, and it creates this nightmare for them, which is Dowd is saying one thing, Ty Cobb is saying another thing.
Yeah.
Now Sarah Sanders, on behalf of the president, is saying sort of a third thing. There is a gang that can't shoot straight aspect to this, and Mueller's going to have to sort it out.
Further complicating this is you have John Dowd, the president has the White House folks legally, and then he's got his personal legal team. And so you have John Dowd, who's part of that personal team, who is saying now that he's the one who actually drafted the tweet that President Trump put out that said he fired Flynn not just because of lying to Vice President Pence, but because he lied to the FBI. So then it seemed like there was this admission, right, Laura, that, oh, he knew he'd lied to the FBI, which we actually know the president did know, but he just hadn't said that at this point in time. She then basically punted that on to John Dowd, saying, look, he clarified that he's the one who was behind the tweet.
Yeah, and the reason they're doing this is like hazmat level cleanup. But all these people, from John Dowd all the way to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, can now kind of vie for the Johnny Appleseed Award. Everyone's planting enough seeds to cast reasonable doubt. All the contradiction is a great thing in the court of public opinion because you never know who has the right story, which one is credible. You combine that